Boredom has always been associated with negativity. Being bored is equated to being bad. But it turns out that being bored is actually more linked to increased productivity, creativity, and even helps us to practice patience if we practice it regularly. Today I want to show you how. Boredom first struck me in July of 2021 when I had just finished and graduated from my master's program in economics back in April of 2021. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to go visit my parents, which currently actually resided in the Caribbean, an island called Bonaire, which is made up of the ABC Islands, of which Bonaire was that B island off the coast of Venezuela. So I went to go visit them kind of with no return flight and kind of seeing how long I would stay and what I could get up to in my free time before finding my first job. But that's when I felt something inside of me shift. I felt this sense of unease. Something wasn't right, something that I had never felt before. And that 2 months in was called boredom. 2 months it took me to completely unwind, to catch up on sleep, and to just get rid of all the excess stress and everything built up in my life. And it allowed me to discover boredom for the first time in my adult life. Although it sounds weird to think that was the first time I truly discovered boredom, it was because I was working the entire summers in order to pay for school and then grinding through school during the school year that I never truly got to experience what boredom really meant and how it felt to just be bored and have nothing to do. So when I came face to face with this idea of boredom, it felt very uncomfortable and like I just had to be doing something. It was this weird feeling that I felt like I always needed to be doing something, that I was going to be late or I needed to hand something in or complete something, which was completely understandable given the amount of schooling I had done, but it was kind of weird. Something inside me didn't allow me to become bored and to let go of all of that go energy. But why was I so wired? One of the main things I've noticed, especially now being in my professional career and having moved on from that point in time, I realized that we're constantly so busy, and although we think it might end with school or when we're working during the summers, that's not at all the case, and it continues into our adult lives where we have our jobs, we have our hobbies, we have our side hustles, our family, seeing friends, making food. All of this adds up and takes up most, if not all, of our time. So there's very little time that's left stagnant or just sitting there for us to utilize being bored. And with these busy schedules, what that brings with it is impatience. Because we're always on the go, we're always in this mood of just doing everything as quickly as we possibly can to churn through these tasks that we have to get done. And so we become very impatient when this happens. And so you realize things like waiting in line for a coffee at Starbucks starts to feel like a burden on you, and it feels like it's so much longer than it needs to be, even if it's just 2 minutes and you're hectically scrolling through your phone or your emails while you're doing that. You can't even just stand in line and wait patiently. And what was most surprising is when I reflected on my own life, even now, this is what I'm thinking of. I often rush very small, insignificant tasks for really no reason at all. And I kind of sit there wondering why I rush the task. Something like getting ready to go to work even though I'm not even late. It just feels like I'm rushing for no apparent reason. And something as simple as my banking app taking longer than the usual time to load is somehow an inconvenience. And I'm very impatient about it. I want it to load instantly. This is by no means conducive to any kind of healthy habits. And so I started to implement what I like to call my boredom practice, which in itself is a lot like what I like to see as meditation. One area where I've seen significant improvement is with my patience. And I used to be very irritable and very easily triggered with things, but taking time out of every week to just have this boredom practice being bored, it helps you to reset, kind of unwind, and just practice to be patient with yourself and just with the world and everything you do in it. And most importantly, on the topic of patience, it also helped me to be patient with myself. I'm always really hard on myself on pushing out more content and better quality content and just constantly pushing myself to do more and more and to do a better job, but taking this time to be bored allows me to kind of dig deep into my thoughts and really acknowledge what I'm doing on an ongoing basis, and maybe even think of things that I can improve and then use those to make things better, of course, and to kind of implement that in the week ahead. But in reality, it helps me to realize that I'm not in a rush. I'm still young, I have time, and being patient is such an important virtue in today's world, and probably even something that's praised and looked up to, because a lot of people don't possess this trait in today's society, and it just helps to slow down my brain, my thinking, and of course my heart rate as well, and helps me to just give this reset to myself. Now, the biggest perk of boredom that I've found to be so impactful, especially in a creative role with this YouTube channel and with other social media things, is the ability to just become more creative. And this is something you'll hear more often when it comes to boredom, and when people talk about boredom, is that it really helps to turn off that very attention-grabbing, demanding conscious brain aspect, and allows your unconscious brain to kind of come alive and think of new solutions and ways to implement different parts of your life in order to think of new solutions, or maybe think of different ideas that you might need for whatever you're working on. For example, if you're stuck on a problem and you're a coder and you're trying to figure out what you're stuck on, being bored can help you kind of just ruminate on those problems instead of just focused attention on it, which oftentimes doesn't even give you the solution you want, and it often comes to you in a time when you're bored, not so obsessed with it in that moment. And as a creator, I'm often jealous of myself just 2 years ago in the Caribbean, being bored and having no agenda whatsoever, nothing to do, nothing to complete, and just having the time to just think and create and come up with things to do and ideas for content to create. And oh man, I'm jealous. I wish I had that time back. Of course, my life is a lot busier now, as I'm sure you can all relate to, but I definitely look fondly back on those days. Funny enough, do you know where I got the idea for this YouTube channel? You probably guessed it. I did it in the middle of July in 2021 when I was on top of this whole boredom practice and utilizing this creativity aspect. I started to think of what I loved doing, which involved both teaching and learning things. And I was able to combine my love of teaching people I was also a teaching assistant in university, so I started to realize that. So I wanted a way to teach people. I also wanted a way to be continuously learning and staying on top of current trends in finance and personal finance. And then finally, I wanted to have a way to help people and have a bigger impact and kind of help people learn about things that we aren't taught in school. And so by marrying these three, I started ruminating what I could do, and the number one thing that kept coming out on top was YouTube. And so that's why I'm doing this. By giving yourself the space to just unwind and be bored for between 30 and 60 minutes, even once a week, can be truly incredible to your creativity. And I find it's best to sit on your bed or a private space that you have in a chair, or even to just go to a park or a library where you have a quiet space that you can sit down and just be by yourself with your thoughts. But it doesn't have to be so focused at first. You don't have to carve out intentional time, especially if you have a crazy busy schedule. It can seem like a lot of effort to schedule this into your daily routine or your weekly routine. And so what I do is when I'm walking to work or on my commute, I like to listen to a podcast or maybe even just to music and just not go on my phone at all and just focus on letting my brain ruminate on problems and think of solutions, think of ideas. And this is such a great way to let your unconscious mind just take over and let those ideas flow to you. So if you don't want to put the time aside, just utilize your commute to work, your commute to school, whatever you need to do, and it really helps, and you'll honestly be amazed what you come up with. Some of my best thumbnail ideas for this YouTube channel actually come to me while I'm walking to work. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but productivity can also be greatly enhanced by utilizing boredom. And that sounds weird, right? When you're being bored, doesn't that feel the complete opposite of being productive? That might seem like the case to you, but it's actually very important to implement boredom to increase your productivity. Let me explain. Cal Newport, who is a computer science professor and the author of the book Deep Work that I recently read, has an entire chapter dedicated to the idea of boredom. He compares our conscious mind to a home computer or a laptop that has very organized code that allows you to do certain things with certain programs. But he also talks about the unconscious mind and how it is like the vast data centers of Google, and how it has all this unstructured data flowing around, and it just has all this stuff that's not organized, and that's your unconscious mind. So when you're able to switch off your conscious mind when you're bored, you can utilize that unconscious brain and start to think of all these ways that things can come together, and it allows your brain to run free. And the second reason he emphasizes being bored is so important is because it allows you to turn off your conscious brain and come back swinging much stronger when you re-implement it. If your conscious brain is constantly problem solving and working and trying to focus all its attention on one thing, it gets so tired of doing this. All right, so now for implementing your boredom practice, which I've done in the last 6 months, and it's completely changed my entire thought process and my creativity, my productivity, my patience, everything. So I want you to start by just doing what I mentioned before and trying it on your commute to work, or when you have a spare moment, or going for a walk or walking your dog. Just put in a podcast, put in some music, leave your phone or put it in your pocket and don't look at it, and just spend 20 to 30 minutes just thinking. Don't put any pressure on yourself, but just think. And you'll be surprised how little we do this on a regular basis. We're often not thinking, but instead just grab our phone and let our phone do our thinking for us by going through social media. So try to do that. Put your phone away. Just think. If you do decide to take the next step and implement it into your schedule, like I do, for 30 to 60 minutes per week, and of course you can increase this if it feels necessary. You can of course do it multiple times per week if that's something you value, and I definitely get value out of this depending on the week, of course. But I like to do it at least once a week, 30 to 60 minutes, put it in my schedule and stick to it, and just act like it's a meeting with yourself, and sit down at that time and utilize it so that it doesn't feel like a burden to you when you're doing it, but it's in your calendar, so you should do it. It's really a good way to kind of get thinking and to kind of not go down a rabbit hole per se, is what I started doing is just looking at the wall, for example. I'll look at the wall for about a couple minutes maybe, and I'll start to think about it. I'll be like, okay, how is this wall a part of my room, and how does that make the whole structure sound? Or I'll think about, how is this wall constructed? What are the layers of it? Is there the 2x4s in the middle, and then you have the drywall and then the paint? Or I think about even how the paint is mixed and how the colors combine to make the color of the walls. It started to think like that. It helps you to kind of unleash that unconscious mind, so to speak, and let it kind of flow freely. Don't worry if there's negative emotions or negative thoughts or even positive thoughts that pop up. It really doesn't matter. It's more in a meditation in that sense, where you can kind of guide where you want to go, but also you want to let your mind be free and just kind of spill everything out, which is why I also advise you to carry a notebook with you, or have a notebook with you when you sit down to do this, so that you can just brain splurge all over the page. With practice, you'll be able to kind of brain dump very quickly and unleash your unlimited energy from your unconscious mind to think of all these cool things, to practice patience, to become more creative and think of new ideas and solutions to problems you might have. And of course, it'll also help with your productivity. If you like this one, I got another one you'll like right here, and I'll see you in the next video.